Join us every Wednesday for InFocus, a weekly talk show produced by the St. Kitts Nevis Information Service, where we provide exclusives with key persons within the government and discuss pertinent, relevant, and interesting matters that affect us all. Tune in every Wednesday, live on ZIZ Radio and streamed live on Facebook at SKNIS Media and ZIZ Online. InFocus, your government, your business.
I'm Ian Richards, welcoming you to InFocus, a weekly program where we take a closer look at what's happening within and across the government of St. Kitts and Nevis, your government. Since 2015, residents across St. Kitts have felt the impact of unpredictable weather, which has resulted in prolonged dry spells, reduced rainfall, and ongoing water rationing measures. As climate conditions shift and demand continues to rise, the government has taken bold steps to increase our water national security, using cutting-edge drone surveys, the construction of desalination plants, and much more. Now, here today to share some exciting updates as we float towards a better future, one drop at a time, are Cromwell Williams, water engineer and manager of the Water Services Department, and Landrith Isaac, assistant engineer at the Water Services Department. Stay with us for InFocus, your government, your business.
If you haven't done it as yet, please do it today. Subscribe to our YouTube page at SKNIS Media for regular updates, live coverage, and even more information on your government. While you're at it, like, share, and interact with our Facebook and Instagram pages at SKNIS Media and SKNIS Info.
Thanks for staying with us, and allow me now to welcome back to InFocus Mr. Cromwell Williams, water engineer and of course the manager of the Water Services Department. Mr. Williams, welcome.
Thank you, Ian. It's a pleasure to be here.
And of course you have Mr. Isaac with you, assistant engineer. It's your first time here, sir?
First time here, yes.
Yes, so welcome as well. Right, good. So Mr. Williams, there's a lot happening, of course, with water, and we want to jump right into it. And so, if you could start off by describing to us the water situation in St. Kitts as of July 2025, what would that be?
Okay, well, first I want to say thanks again for having us here at the Water Department. Myself and my colleague, Mr. Isaac, a mixture of youth and experience. Of course, we represent a strong workforce of over 130 employees at the Water Services Department, working every day to endeavor our best to ensure that persons have a safe and reliable supply of water. And of course, we know, as you've mentioned, that there's been some challenges in recent years in ensuring that every business, every resident of St. Kitts have a 24-hour, 7 days a week supply of water. But we are working to overcome that deficit, as it were. We have had a fairly good first half of the year because mainly we have had reasonably good rainfall. And so at the end of the day, we always want to let persons know that when you open that tap and the water comes out, you first have to give God thanks because it comes from the rain. And so we've had a fairly good first half of the year. Normally the first half of the year is very dry. That's the dry season. And as we are now, we're going into the latter half of the year. We will normally have the wet season, and we will normally expect more rainfall, especially around September and so on, when we have the height or the peak of the hurricane season. So because we've had a bit more rain thus far, we still have had to ration in many areas, but in some areas we've been able to be a bit more reliable in the supply. So, we just need to continue to, as a department, try our best to see how we can distribute the water that we have. And secondly, always want to encourage the customers, the users of the water, that your reliability also depends a lot on you and how you utilize the water resource. Because at the end of the day, if you waste it, every customer who wastes water is in fact denying another customer the opportunity to use that water. And so we want to always also emphasize on conservation. All of us must do our part. And I think that that message is getting around to some persons, but there's still many others who have some work to do.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, the rainfall for the year, Mr. Williams, there's a graphic that we have, that's a rainfall graphic that we can show on the screen now, and it speaks to exactly what you were mentioning in terms of the rainfall. And if you look at the graphic, particularly as of May, as we wait for it to come up on the screen, you would realize that there was a bit of a spike in the rainfall in May, and that is about 238 millimeters of rain that fell, 238.5. And also in January, you would see that, and the orange is for 2025 for those who are looking and may not be able to read the screen correctly. You would see that also in January, there was a bit of an increase over 2024. But for February, March, and April, you would see that there are significant decreases, particularly in February, it's more than half, and also in March as well too. April is a little bit closer in terms of the comparisons for 2024 and 2025, but generally there's a trend downward in terms of rainfall.
Wow. Yes, so I'm a bit surprised because I thought we got more rain than we did last year for this dry season. But the graph is showing that in fact we got less. But nonetheless, we were able to make some improvements in our system in terms of how we distribute, and I think that has borne some fruit in many areas. I could think of the St. Peter's area, for instance. I think, yes, now and again we have some interruption, but generally the reliability has improved in the St. Peter's area, and that is expected to improve even more significantly when we commission our desalination plant in the next coming weeks.
Okay, all right, so let's talk a bit now in terms of the water rationing, because it's something you touch on. Mr. Isaac, perhaps you can jump in here as well too, in terms of explaining to the public why is water rationing really necessary?
Well, we at the Water Services Department don't like the word rationing. We prefer to say a reduce in water service.
Thank you.
But there's a lot of interrelated factors which has led to the rationing or the limited reduced water service. One mainly being climate change, of course. So Mr. Williams touched a bit on that. And even as you observe in the mapping of the graph, even though there might be a spike numerically, there isn't an even distribution of it. There could be 15 days of no rain, and then all of a sudden on one day a lot of rainfall. And so the rainfall also works in tandem with the temperature. We've had very, very high temperatures recently, and this would lead to evaporation, very rapid evaporation, which reduces the infiltration of the water down into our aquifers. And so this limits our aquifer recharge, and so which means less water in our aquifers and reduce groundwater supply, which is something that we have to manage daily. And in conjunction with this, we also have the increasing demand, and so we've had some struggles over the years for our supply to meet that demand. We have agriculture, tourism, residential growth, and increased commercial activity. So all these things require water, and so this is also an additional challenge for us. Thirdly, we have some aging infrastructure. We haven't been able to improve our infrastructure as fast as we wanted to, and so and in conjunction with the last point Mr. Williams made about just our own personal use of water and conserving water. So these four challenges, I would say, are the major ones that has led to the reduced water service for St. Kitts.
All right, and if you recall the image that was on the graph in terms of the month of May, that was really a weather system that was passing, and so that speaks to what you mentioned in terms of prolonged dry spells, but then a big downpour one day, maybe 2 days, and that would influence it. But still, it skews, because they say numbers don't lie, but still it skews, it skews it, and so that really doesn't give a true picture, so to speak. So just something I wanted to mention, Mr. Williams, and as you mentioned St. Peter's, because of course you said that situation is expected to improve, but before the challenges that still exist, and there's some persons who wouldn't understand, why is it necessary for the reduced service of water to be done at particular times?
Right.
And I think it goes back to this, not to get too scientific, but there is something called salt intrusion that really, I think, gives a good explanation. Tell us how that works.
So in St. Kitts, right now, because over the years we have had to increase production, and we have developed more and more of our groundwater resources. By the way, the country has more natural resource in terms of groundwater than fresh water, meaning surface water, like from the mountains.
That would be fresh water. The fresh water is on the surface.
The mountain water, yeah,
Right.
let's say surface water,
Right,
which
right.
is from the sources from the mountain.
Right.
So right now, about more than 2/3 of our water comes from wells, groundwater. Now, in extracting that groundwater, it's a very delicate balance, because the groundwater floats on seawater or brackish water. And so every time we drill a well, there's only so much we can extract from that particular well. If you overpump it, you will pull in seawater. And so because of that, we have to carefully measure what is the safe maximum yield of each well. So sometimes we drill a well and then we test it. We might get 5, 10, 15 gallons per minute only, which is not sustainable. That can't provide much to a community. Most of our wells are over 100 gallons per minute. We have wells up to 300 gallons per minute. And so that can supply, a village, maybe even more than one village. So that basically is it in a nutshell, in that we have to always remember that there is a limit to how much water we can pump from the ground, so that we don't over abstract the freshwater lens, and as a consequence cause salt water to infiltrate. So we call that salt water infiltration. So we have to avoid that at all costs, because if that happens, it will take decades and decades and decades to be rectified.
Right, that's the point I actually was going to ask you about. What are the consequences of that?
Right,
you just
serious.
lose all well.
Very severe. Yes, so, and we're proud that in St. Kitts we have wells that we have been pumping now for 50 years, over 50 years. And that is a remarkable achievement. It shows that we have been doing our groundwater extraction on a sustainable basis.
But just that the challenge is there now because there's reduced rainfall.
Right.
So let's talk a bit then about a common concern that I've had, where persons say that the best way to tackle the water shortage should be to increase water storage facilities. Is that practical?
Well, we have to increase water storage facilities capacity. We've always been doing that. It's nothing new. However, all we've been saying to the public is that it's a matter of sequencing, which one comes first. If right now we don't have enough water to provide 24-hour service, that is not because we don't have enough storage capacity. That is simply because we do not have enough supply. The wells and the spring sources in the mountains, they just aren't enough right now to meet the demand. So when we look at the overall demand of St. Kitts, it's about at least 6 million gallons per day. When we look at what we can supply, based on all the wells and all the surface sources, it's only about 5 million gallons. So we have a deficit of at least 1 million gallons per day. Now, what we're saying is the government must first spend its money on finding new sources, additional sources, and hence that is desalination, that is constructing desalination plants, and that is drilling additional wells. Once we have that additional water, of course we know we have to increase the storage, but it makes no sense to first build more storage when you have no water to put in the storage anyway. Most of the tanks are empty. That is why we have to shut down at nights so that the tanks can get a chance to replenish overnight. So it's a no-brainer, really.
Right. And also, Mr. Isaac, if you look at the type of soil that is here in St. Kitts and Nevis, there are some persons who say that, you know, you look at the guts, especially when there's that heavy downpour, that the water runs away. But the runoff average, really based on the scientific studies, suggests that most of the water that falls in St. Kitts, that it runs into the aquifers, as opposed to running away into the sea.
Yeah, it's debatable. As we expressed, that some heavy intensity rainfall does allow for some runoff to happen, and we do have fertile soil here that encourages the permeability of the rainfall to infiltrate into the soil. But it's just a lot of factors that really don't always benefit the recharge of the aquifer at this time. But there are a lot of misconceptions with regards to looking at the amount of runoff that happens and relating it back to, oh, that could just be stored in a tank somewhere. So there's some truth and some false to it. Yeah, a few fallacies, if I could say so.
Because as you mentioned, Mr. Williams, even if you store it, the demand is still higher.
Yeah.
It will be gone within a matter of days.
Of course.
Right. Okay, so as you speak about new wells, of course, we would have seen in May 2024, and it's hard to believe it's been so long. I actually was surprised that was way back in 2024, where we saw a new well being discovered and being commissioned in Keon. What has been the impact of that well?
Well, it has been very impactful. Immediately, Keon was restored to 24/7 water supply.
I'm a resident of Keon, so it's a success story for me as well.
Yeah, until today, and God willing, for many, many years to come, you know, that well, which is producing over 400,000 gallons per day, you know, will guarantee that the people of Keon and the surrounding communities have 24/7 water supply. And that is what we're going to replicate around the island.
And the minister responsible for water, the Honorable Conris Maynard, made a presentation in Parliament last week, that was on July 10, and he spoke about the fact that the well is so meeting the demand, it's able to meet the demand that actually now you're able to pump, as you mentioned, 400,000. You can pump more, which means that the government, as you touched on, will have to build a new storage tank.
Right.
Because in that facility, it's a good thing to have too much water in that case.
Yes, yes. And so even in Keon, again, we have a 200,000 gallon storage tank. We are in the process of constructing a 1 million gallon storage tank. We're going to do it in two phases. We're going to do two tanks. One, the first 500,000 gallon, and then a little later we'll build another 500,000. Now we have something to store in the tank. So, you know, that is the process. You see, the storage tank is only a holding, and normally you try to have about 2 days storage. Meaning, if your supply is interrupted for 2 days, let's say the well goes down, unfortunately, or we're even servicing the well, it means that for that period, there is no supply coming in, but if your tank is full, it should last 2 days. That is the principle of the storage tank. It's not meant for you to have storage for a month or 6 months. Matter of fact, that storage naturally exists underground in the aquifer.
That's right.
That's where the storage is. So we don't need to build it above ground, the huge, large storage, because it's already in the ground. And so because we're so blessed in St. Kitts to have our groundwater, where we have good quality water, where we're able to pump straight from the ground, straight into a storage tank, just add chlorine, you know, for safety, and distribute to the population. So we really have a naturally good system that is productive.
So Keon is a success story in terms of a new well being discovered and being used to serve the area. What else is being done in terms of to establish new wells here in St. Kitts and Nevis? Of course, they have to be found first. Well, I said Nevis, but Water Services Department is St. Kitts. It's the habit. It's one federation, of course, but we appreciate the department serves St. Kitts. What else is being done to discover new wells?
So we've recently completed some field testing for our semi-airborne geophysical surveys. That's where we use a drone to detect our groundwater sources. It's a cost-effective, non-invasive method. Mr. Williams would tell me about the traditional methods before, where they had to drill blindly, basically, for some test wells. This was expensive. This would disrupt the land. And so this method of the airborne drone survey just uses a massive drone, as you could see there in the image, and it carries a sensor, and this interacts with some electrodes on the ground. And that interaction gives us a good picture, a subsurface picture of what is happening underground. And it helps us to detect where we could get groundwater. Mm-hmm. So this was done recently from Brighton's through Date Bay, Sadler's, right over to Challengers. And so the goal is to see where we could construct another 10 wells with perhaps the same yield as the Keon well. The preliminary results are looking promising so far.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Williams, what are the benefits of using this methodology? Of course, Mr. Isaac just touched on, perhaps you can speak about what was done before and how more efficient this process is.
Right, so it's about the use of technology, and we know that you can't escape the use of technology to improve our life in so many ways. So ideally, persons have always asked, how do you determine where to drill? And this is using the latest technology to help us to determine where to drill and where not to drill. Because the ground beneath us, we can't see with our natural eyes. I mean, we're drilling, the Keon well is over 500 feet. Mm-hmm. I mean, how do you know what is down there? Mm-hmm. And so using this technology helps us to construct, as it were, that profile to the ground. It can go up to 1,000 feet or thereabout. And so we are able to see what type of rock formations we will encounter as we drill. And we're also able to see where the water table is and so on. So it is cost effective. That's one of the thing about it. It is also time effective, because if we were to utilize the ground method, which we have used in the past, to cover such a vast area, would take us months. Mm-hmm. What using the drone technology they were able to do in about 2 weeks, mm-hmm. that would have taken about at least 6 months to a year. Mm. So it is vastly different in terms of being able to access this technology.
And are there any particular areas that has shown much promise based on the survey?
Well, we're still awaiting the report, but they have indicated that the preliminaries look very encouraging.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Any idea when the survey will be concluded?
I would say probably in the next 2 weeks or so, we expect to get their report.
Mm-hmm. And based on when you get the report, what are the next steps?
Well, we have already conducted the request for proposals from a public request for proposals from drilling companies, and we have already selected the winning company, and they have already been granted or given their letter of acceptance. So they are just waiting now for the contract to be signed. The contract is being drafted by the government. It was sent to them recently, just last week. We are now waiting for them to get back to us, and then once we agree on the terms of the contract will be signed, hopefully in the next week or two. And then they've indicated that they will be on island within a month once the contract is signed.
Mm-hmm. In an ideal world, and it's a hypothetical, and I don't necessarily like hypotheticals, but in an ideal world, how much groundwater capacity do you hope to unlock through this initiative?
Right, so previous studies for St. Kitts have indicated that we should have a sustainable safe yield of about 11 million gallons per day. Right now we have already developed approximately half of that, about 5. So we're hoping that this study and drilling process will unlock anywhere between 4 to 5 million gallons, I would say, at least.
And that would help to meet the demand.
Definitely. That would put us in a good stead for the next decade or so.
Right. Okay. And of course, that while it's used as science, of course, you still have to do the work in terms of constructing the well, building the well, extracting the water. Yes. And all of that could take time. But the government also has embarked on another measure, as you touched on earlier, desalination, to seek new sources of water for our persons to use here in St. Kitts and Nevis. And so we want to talk about desalination, but we're up against the clock, so we're going to have to take our first break at this time. And during the break, persons listening and watching will be able to hear a bit from the minister responsible for water, the Honourable Congress Maynard, during his presentation in Parliament on the 10th of July. And I believe he may be discussing a bit more, Mr. Williams, what you said in terms of getting that contract done for the drillers so that work can really proceed assiduously here on finding new sources of water. Stay right there. We'll be right back with more in Focus.
We're doing things as well in the ministry in parallel. So while the sites are being identified, while the wells are being scoped out, we are also procuring the drilling to go along with it, so that as soon as we get results to say that this is the point to drill, the driller is standing by with his drill to go into the soil and give us some water. So actual drilling operations are expected to commence later in the year once the sites have been identified.
Welcome back to InFocus. We continue our discussion with engineers from the Water Services Department. We have the manager and water engineer, Mr. Cromwell Williams, and he's joined by Mr. Landrith Isaac, who is an assistant engineer at the Water Services Department. Though, let's talk about desalination. Of course, we covered the wells quite a bit, and that's very promising, and we look forward to hearing more about that during the year. And as the minister mentioned, hopefully drilling can begin sometime this year. That's the expectation. But then there's also desalination, and persons can see that with their own eyes. Of course, there was one that was done in the by the UAE. It was sponsored by the UAE in Canada. And also there's one being done at Birdwalk, which is much larger. And it goes back to, something that, a line that I recall from a poem by Samuel Taylor Coleridge, and of course the poem is called The Rime of the Ancient Mariner. And it says, water, water everywhere, but not a drop to drink. And technology today, as we spoke about technology earlier, has allowed us to actually use the sea, which is what he was comparing about. There's water everywhere, but you can't drink it based on the salinity of it. Right. But you're able to extract the salt now to produce fresh water. And that actually has been done here in St. Kitts and Nevis for quite a number of years. Royal Utilities, which is the Marriott. The government collaborated with Royal Utilities on desalination to help to provide additional fresh water. How is that arrangement been working?
So yeah, as you mentioned, Royal Utilities, they operate a desalination plant at the Marriott, and they're also under agreement to provide some water to our grid that assists some areas in Frigate Bay. They've been reliable for the most part, and so this frees up our resources that we could reallocate elsewhere as well. And so it's an excellent example of private sector contributing to our national resilience. Park Hyatt also has a desal plant as well. And so there are many examples of where desalination has already been present in the country. And so now we're also just enhancing on those existing technologies using the reverse osmosis method as we know it to be, to get salt water to potable water quality.
Right. And so, Mr. Williams, of course, as I mentioned, the UAE sponsored 2 desalination plants, one for St. Kitts, one for Nevis. Tell us a bit about the first one for St. Kitts. That would have been established in the Canada Estate area. What's happening there?
Right. So that plant has been in use for just about a couple of months now. It's a valid and valuable contribution to our system. It provides just over 30 gallons per minute, which is like one of our smaller wells. So, it's a worthwhile contribution. One of the significance of this desal plant, though, apart from the fact that we are converting seawater into fresh potable water, is the fact that this plant is solar powered. And so during the day, it is driven by the sun and solar panels, which is amazing because there's so much conservation in terms of expenditure, in terms of having to use fuel from SKNIS. We have not yet begun using it at nights using SKNIS grid, but we will start doing that shortly. But for now, we're just running it using the solar panels. So during the day, it's providing water into our system, and it's totally powered by solar panels.
And
so we're very happy for that.
What has been the impact of that plant, and which areas have seen benefits?
We have been using it mainly to supply the area in proximity to it, that is from just on the Canada estate going back towards Bastia. So it actually is supplying most of the industries in that area, in the Canada area, the SKNIS masonry and a couple of other industries that are in that area, mainly for now.
Now, the larger of the second desalination plants, and this one is funded, of course, mainly by the government with assistance from the Republic of China, Taiwan, I believe it is, is a 2 million gallon per day desalination plant at Bird Rock. How is that coming?
2 million gallons per day from a desalination plant is significant. Construction started late last year, maybe September, October. December. And we are actually near completion. We're looking at another month or two before commissioning. The contractor Royal Utilities have been hitting all the milestones, and they've been very professional and very on time with regards to all their targets. In conjunction, we've recently completed, or substantially completed, the installation of the 16-inch pipeline that would connect the desalination plant to our Mom Peak tank, which has about 1.9 million gallons of storage. And so we're very happy with the progress it's made so far, and we're really looking forward to see how it impacts Bastia and the immediate environs, which could include St. Peter's. And everyone will definitely benefit from the commissioning of this 2 million gallon plant.
Mr. Williams, because of course with 2 million, you mentioned that we're currently producing about 5 million. The demand is 6, so it takes you over.
Yeah. I mean, that plant alone is almost a 40% increase in our overall production. So we anticipate that immediately Bastia will be returned to 24/7 water supply. When I say Bastia, I mean the Bastia system, which includes not just Bastia proper, but Frigate Bay, Southeast Peninsula, Connery, St. Peter's, and even going west to some of the communities. And so we will have enough water, and this is a significant investment, $50 million EC in just less than a year. It's a significant investment for the country, but it's one that is necessary because St. Kitts is developing so rapidly, and we just have to make sure that we keep abreast and ahead in terms of public infrastructure, water being one of those most critical elements of that public infrastructure.
All right, and of course water is a key part of the sustainable island state agenda that the government is currently pursuing to transform the federation into such. Is it going to be powered the same way as well too in terms of solar panels?
No, it's going to be powered by SKNIS grid, but at the same time we have to acknowledge that SKNIS is also diversifying into green energy, solar being one. And so I know that there is plans afoot by SKNIS to have a solar plant constructed in the same Bastia Valley aquifer, wellfield area. And so, there's that synergy between energy, solar, green energy, and water production. So while water department is not directly feeding our desal plant from solar PV, it is indirectly going to be done through SKNIS.
And what is the strategy to manage the wastewater and brine and other products that is something that comes from desalination? Of course, there's the increased salinity because you're separating water, the salt from the water. So what do you do with all of that salt? What's the process there?
Right. So it's important to note, yes, that if we're producing 2 million gallons per day of potable water from seawater, we have to pull in, we're taking in, or pulling in from the sea twice that amount, because roughly half goes to fresh water and the other half goes back out into the sea via pipeline as an extra, well, a concentrated seawater or brine, which is, let's say, roughly twice as concentrated. So that is diffused. It is first, the pipeline goes offshore. The distance, I can't quite recall, but it's probably about almost a kilometer. It's diffused, so it's not just dumped at one point. It is diffused over a length of the pipeline. So that diffusion automatically results in mixing and quick dilution back into the sea. And so we have done the necessary environmental impact studies, we have done the necessary simulations, and we are confident that the impact in that area will be minimal. So as I said, the EIA is there, and it's a public document. If persons want to look at it, it had to be, so we had to submit it to the physical planning department, where it was reviewed by Department of Environment and others, and it was approved as necessary.
We also monitor the pH, salinity, temperature to ensure compliance, of course. So everything is done to avoid damage to the marine ecosystem.
And there for some persons, Mr. Williams, who may feel that, and Mr. Isaac, you can jump in as well, who feel that, they don't necessarily trust the desalination process. What would you say to them?
Okay. Desalination has been around for a very long time, decades and decades. And it has been improving significantly, just like most technologies, just like our television. Once ago we had a big box. Now we have a flat screen.
We even have curved screens now.
Technology improved, and desalination is no different. The technology has improved. Back a couple of decades ago, a couple of years ago even, the taste, I think, was a consideration. But then I think some of the plants in the region would have been using what was called like a flash distillation, meaning that they were basically heating the water, and you would condense the evaporate, which is steam, and you would get the thing. But sometimes there was taste issues. However, with the introduction of reverse osmosis, which is a totally different method, that method has transformed the product that you get at the end of the day. And so go down to the Marriott, and they have had their reverse osmosis plant for over 20 years, or just about 20 years. When you drink water from there, you can't tell the difference. Matter of fact, as Mr. Isaac mentioned, just over a year ago, we started taking water from that plant to augment our supply in the Frigate Bay area. We've never had customers that says, I can tell when you switch, because very often we switch from our supply to the desal supply from Marriott. And persons cannot tell when we switch, because when sometimes Marriott plant is down, and they would say, look, we're down, we can't give you any water right now, we have to go and open back so that water flows from our system to those customers. So really there's really little or no difference in the desal water today. That's because the technology has improved so much. What we do with the reverse osmosis, we take out everything, all of the salts, and then we add back a little bit just to get that right balance, or a little bit of taste as it is. But water really should have no taste. So, I mean, yeah, the technology has improved significantly.
And Mr. Isaac, in terms of, is it treated still with chlorine, or is that necessary?
Yes, to some extent, it's still treated with chlorine, and some other quality testing is still done, definitely.
Okay, all right. And so the next exciting project I think that the Water Department is pursuing would be the St. Kitts Nevis Trans Water Project, and we're going to talk a bit about that because I'm not too familiar about the project myself, so I'm excited to learn a bit more about this project and how it intends to benefit us here in St. Kitts. And so we're going to take our final break before we have that discussion. Stay right there, we'll be right back with more In Focus.
It is intended that when the Bastia desalination plant is complete, that we would be able to bring the entire Bastia Basin back to 24-hour-a-day water. That has not happened for 10 to 15 years. So I am speaking of everywhere in Bastia, over to the Southeast Peninsula, that will be positively affected by this improvement.
Welcome back to In Focus. We have our final segment with Mr. Cromwell Williams and Mr. Landrith Isaac of the Water Services Department as we speak about plans that the government has taken to ensure that St. Kitts does have that 24/7 supply of water that we so desperately hope to get back to as residents here in St. Kitts and Nevis. And of course the results are promising. So as I mentioned before we went to break, Mr. Williams, the St. Kitts and Nevis Trans Water Project, tell us what that is.
Okay, I'll let Mr. Isaac. Okay. But before Mr. Isaac mentioned that, just one more thing about the desalinating water it's no different really from what companies do in terms of preparing the bottled water. It's the same process. They're using reverse osmosis. So they're taking our water and they're running it through filters, through pressurized filters, reverse osmosis, and they take out whatever minerals are in the water. But of course, we believe that water naturally, as God gives us, should have some minerals in it, some of the calcium, the sodium, and so on. Those are naturally occurring in the environment. So, that's quite in order. And of course, you always have World Health Organization or US EPA provide guidelines as to what are the safe limits for those naturally occurring minerals. Right? So I just wanted to make the point that there should be absolutely no mistrust of desalinated water, because that is what you're buying in the bottle, actually. It's the same thing.
Right. Okay. The Transwater Project, Mr.
Yes.
Isaac?
So the SKN Transwater Project is short for transitioning the water supply in St. Kitts and Nevis to a climate resilient, low carbon water sector. And so this involves modernizing the water supply in St. Kitts and Nevis. It's a joint thing between St. Kitts and Nevis. We are working in collaboration with the 5 Cs, or the Caribbean Community Climate Change Center, in hoping to get access from funds from the Green Climate Fund. It is a multi-stage process of approvals. We would have gotten approval for our concept note, and so now we're in the what you call the project facility stage. And so this involves feasibility studies, social and economic assessments, and providing project or developing project indicators that would ensure a technically and financially strong project proposal. And so we're hoping that all these can be approved by some point in 2026, and then we can really see the physical efforts of that project.
You use the term modernizing. Just exactly what does that mean?
Modernizing. So the Green Climate Fund is, we're hoping to have access to about 42 million US dollars. And so this would ensure that the materials we use for our tanks, not only the concrete tanks, but we have the glass steel to fuse tanks, improving the piping infrastructure from maybe just the PVC to HDPE, which is an improved material for piping. It also involves us getting into smart metering, moving from the conventional meters. Could also be us getting into SCADA, where we could have remote control of our infrastructure and our valving. And so a lot of the stuff that we do right now are very manual. And so we're just trying to see how we could modernize and improve our infrastructure in that regard.
And with modernization, Mr. Williams, comes efficiency. So tell us a bit about some of the benefits from this project. Of course, Mr. Isaac just touched on some of that.
So apart from improving the technology that we want to use in our systems, the project itself would involve things like increasing storage. So we will be constructing tanks, as mentioned, pipelines. Actually, we had originally planned for desalination to be part of this Transwater project because it's about improving our resilience to climate change. And desalination is one of the ways in which we would build resilience to climate change, because the sea, I mean, regardless of in any particular year what rainfall we get, we would always have an almost unlimited supply of raw water in terms of the seawater. So that is building resilience. So the technology, yes, is important. We want to ensure that we maximize our use of technology, and that will, as you said, result in efficiency and reliability. Mr. Isaac mentioned the use of SCADA, which is supervisory control and data acquisition. For years, we've had a system, depends a lot on manual operations, where persons will go turn on the pumps, and then at some point they will check the level in the tanks, make sure it's not overflowing, and then, if the tank is full, they will turn off the pump. When the tank drops to a certain level, you turn back on the pump, and so on. And so all of that can be easily automated using technology nowadays, and we can stay in our office and we can see the level of water that is in the tank, and we can see whether or not the pump is on, and we can, so it will cut down on the amount of personnel that have to get in vehicles have to go up and down, wear and tear, and so on. And plus human error, because someone can turn off the pump in the morning at 7 o'clock and say, I'll go back at 12 o'clock and turn it back on, because I think by then the tank should drop from full to 3 quarts. And then in the evening, we realize people start calling saying they don't have water, and when we check, we realize the guy somehow did not go back and turn back on the pump, and so the tank fall to empty or almost empty. And so we want to eliminate, or minimize significantly those type of human errors by having, a system that is much better. We're much better able to monitor, the system.
And it also helps to improve the safety for the men and women going out in the field, Mr. Isaac, because, of course, some of the sources are, as you mentioned earlier, in the mountains. They're higher up, and so they don't necessarily have to drive all, especially in wet conditions. It could be very dangerous.
Yeah, lots of remote areas, and, we rely on them to wake up 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock in the morning. It's very dark. Again, in the evenings, down to about 8, 9 p.m., and so this system will definitely help improve the safety of our workers, which is, of course, very important to us as well.
And the prospect of laying new pipes, of course, we referred earlier to Minister Maynard's presentation in Parliament. He mentioned that there are quite a number of older pipes that currently are being replaced by the Water Services Department. I believe I saw that there was some sort of an interruption in water service supply today based on the fact that there's some rupture in a pipe as well. To talk to us a bit about the importance of having those older pipes replaced.
Yes, so it is important, yes, because a pipeline only have a certain lifespan, usually anywhere from 50 years. Once it passed that 50-year mark, you would expect that the regular or the frequency at which you start doing maintenance on that pipeline, you have to do an analysis to determine whether or not you go every week, every 2 weeks to repair that pipeline, or you just change out, the pipeline on a whole. and save that expense. And so we've had some challenges, particularly on the Southeast Peninsula pipeline in the last couple of years. That pipeline was put in about 30-something years ago. So we would expect it to have still been good, and it is still good in many areas, but what we found is that in some areas, particularly around the salt pond, I guess because of the soil type there, the pipe has deteriorated faster than we would have normally expected, and because of that, we are in the process of replacing a considerable length of that pipeline. Efforts were made to mitigate, in that I think the pipeline was actually wrapped in a type of plastic material, but notwithstanding that, we've still been encountering too frequent breakage, and that of course have caused us sometimes even to have to break open the road, and we know the public are not happy with us every time we have to open the road to fix a pipe. And so because of that, we're going to have to replace that length of pipeline. And of course, there are other areas around the island where once we realize that we have to repair a pipeline, breakages and leaks on that line too frequently, we will make a decision that we need to just replace that portion of pipeline.
And of course, Mr. Isaac, the department hosted a number of public consultations, updating persons about the project and how they stand to benefit. How many were held, and what were some of the key takeaways from those consultations?
Yes, so the consultancy team were here sometime in June. We held public meetings every day that week. We started at the Clarence Fitzroy Bryan College, and then the team went to Nevis to address their challenges there. We also went to Sadler's, St. Paul's, and at the McKnight Community Center. Although there were relatively small turnouts physically, they were also aired live. So we did have some good turnout on the live areas. But most persons were just really concerned about, when will they see an improvement in water supply. And the same thing, like, you just trying to get enlightened on what the Transwater project does. So while we touched on a lot of the physical aspects with regards to infrastructure improvements, the Transwater project also addresses water policy, and so the legal framework surrounding how we manage our water resource. It also touches on non-revenue water, NRW, what we call NRW. So it addresses the leaks, and how we plan to improve in that regard as well. And so the public meetings are also socially sensitive. So they wanted to touch on how gender and water is interacted and what we're doing to address the vulnerable in that regard. So yeah, it's a very all-inclusive project and process, and so we're very heavily involved in a lot of data gathering as well. So yeah, the public meetings are really just to have that public engagement in the process of the decision making of the whole process.
You're pleased with the outcomes of the meetings based on the public feedback?
Well, we really expected a lot more people because we thought people were really concerned about water. We sent out everything on WhatsApp, on Facebook. We had a vehicle with the speaker, encouraging everyone to come, but the turnout was, I guess, disappointingly small, but we hope that the persons present take that information and spread it to where it needs to go. But as we say in our slogan, every drop counts, and so even if it's one person, he could save a gallon that could be used for a gallon somewhere else. Yes.
Of course, as you speak about the gender aspect of it. But Mr. Williams, it actually touches on a much larger problem that I think the department is really trying to overcome, and it's the messaging. There's been many conversations over the years about the importance of conserving water, and you were sure to include that in your opening statement as well. But it doesn't seem like the message really is getting through to our people. I mean, we are sometimes seemingly more concerned about complaining that there is no water without understanding what the issues are. And when there is water, there is that abuse that is commonly seen. So how does the department really tend to get new strategies or to help to improve the communication of these things and really help to drive behavioral change?
That is a very heavy question, but we have to really see water as the management of water in a holistic manner, not just as a supply, just looking at water supply, or the Water Services Department is supposed to supply the country with water. That is only half of the coin. The other half is, what do we do with that water when we get it? And that, unfortunately, has been ignored for far too long. There has never been the type of emphasis on water usage. Water usage. It's always been about water production, water supply. We're not producing enough water. We need more water. But the fact is that probably almost half of the water that the Water Services Department provides is going to waste. Yes, there will always be some loss in our transmission lines. That is a fact. That can only be reduced so much. And I believe there's room for that and work to be done there. But what we want the public to focus on is that it is quite possible as well for you, the public, you, the consumer, to also focus on your obligation in terms of what do you do with the water that comes to your meters. And so some persons have been getting that message, and some persons have been taking actions. Some persons monitor their usage and are very economical in their usage. They conserve. On the other hand, there are some who ignore that message, and action need to be taken. Government need to take action with regards to persons who waste water. If you are a household, for instance, say an average household of maybe 5 persons, you need to know how much water should your household be drawing from the public system. And if it is about 5, 6, maybe 7,000 gallons, if the water department says you're drawing twice that amount, 3 times that amount, which happens more often than we would like to know, then what are you doing about it? Because it could mean that you have singly one toilet that is acting up. Maybe the flap on that toilet is not closing properly, or the valve that closes off the toilet is not working properly and the water is just flowing. But what we have is, because over the years we have not been diligent in enforcing revenue collection, that is making people pay for the water they use. That is because that has become our culture, where we are lax on collections. People have been allowed to go for months and years using, as I said, 3 times, 4 times and more what they should be using. And so we have to change that culture. If we are talking about managing water in a sustainable way, then that means holding users accountable for the water that passes through their meter.
And a rate adjustment must be considered at some time. I mean,
obviously.
Growing up, my mother paid $20 for water per month. And of course, the bill, this is almost 50 years later.
25 years.
$20 for water.
25 years.
Yes.
So that speaks for itself. Yeah, the rate increase speaks for itself. But even before that, we have to talk about just people beginning to understand that, you know, there are a lot of persons out there who are using several times what they should be using because of leaks, and we have to go after that water. It's cheaper to go after that water than to build a 50 million gallon desal plant.
Right. Absolutely. Okay, so we're almost out of time. Mr. Isaac and Mr. Williams, I'll give you final comments, opportunity. Mr. Isaac, we'll start with you.
Yeah, definitely. So just in closing, just from the water we drink from our glass to the crops that we grow to the business that we run, water is a common thread that sustains our lives and livelihoods. And as Mr. Williams expressed, we're really looking to the support of the people to play their part in safeguarding this natural resource, which is very precious to us. The Water Department is working very hard to ensure that we guarantee you that good, reliable, potable water supply. And so just be assured that we're fully committed and dedicated to ensuring that we do so.
Ms. Williams?
Yes, I want to thank Ian and the SKNIS and ZIS for this opportunity for us to come again to the public to share our concerns about the management of water, the sustainable management of water in our island. We cannot take it for granted. Our actions today also affect the future scenario for water. There are some aspects that we wouldn't have touched on, even things like potential pollution. The farmers, the way in which you utilize fertilizers and pesticides is very critical because our water is on the ground. Even persons, John Public, how you dispose of your waste is critical because our water source is on the ground. And so we have to bear that in mind, that we all have to work together to ensure the future sustainability of our water resources.
And we can probably have that discussion in part 2 sometime in the future, perhaps when the the desalination plant is up and running. We certainly would like to get a bit more information about how the process will work. But in the meantime, we have to leave our discussion there. So thank you very much, Mr. Isaac, Mr. Williams, for joining us for this edition of InFocus.
Yes, thank you.
We'd like to thank you, viewers and listeners, also for being with us. We trust that you will join us next week at the same place, at the same time, for another edition. Remember, it's InFocus, your government, your business. I'm Ian Richards.
Join us every Wednesday for InFocus, a weekly talk show produced by the St. Kitts Nevis Information Service, where we provide exclusives with key persons within the government and discuss pertinent, relevant, and interesting matters that affect us all. Tune in every Wednesday, live on ZIZ Radio and streamed live on Facebook at SKNIS Media and ZIZ Online. InFocus, your government, your business.